Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you guys listening. The fact that you would include me in your day as part of your routine, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it means a great deal to me. So thank you very much. I've been feeling really good the past couple weeks because each month the podcast has gotten more downloads than it has the previous month. So starting to see some slow but steady growth, and that is thanks to you, the listeners. So thank you guys very much if you are listening to the show, if you're telling people about the show. We're on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. You can add us to your favorites playlist on Stitcher. That helps me out. Or you can subscribe on iTunes, or if you can just tell a friend. I greatly appreciate the fact that you enjoyed the show so much that you would want to do that. It means a lot to me, so thank you. This is kind of a exciting episode today. On the show today is comedian Steve Hofstetter. If you're a comedian, you definitely know who Steve Hofstetter is. He's tours internationally. He's a huge college act. He's famous on YouTube for heckler destruction videos. He gets a lot of views on those. He's a club owner. I believe he's the CEO of the production company Comedy Juice right now, if I remember his website correctly. And to me specifically, he's my former boss. When I was still new to New York City and I was like just trying to think of every possible way to make some kind of connection with the comedy industry, any way I could get stage time, one of the early things I did, and I talk about this with Steve in the episode, is I was not only a doorman at the Laughing Devil Comedy Club, which is sadly no longer in existence in Long Island City in Queens, but I also, before the Laughing Devil even opened, I went by, because I was on Steve's mailing list, and I helped build this stage just to help out, because I wanted to help introduce myself, because when you are a comedian and you're just not, and the stage time is coming slowly and what's the best way to describe it? Intermittently at best. You kind of will look for any possible way that you can connect yourself to the comedy industry. And Steve's a big part of the industry, not only as a touring performer, but as a producer. And I worked at his club for a number of years, and you'll hear me, we'll discuss this in the story, but the most viral thing I've ever been a part of occurred at a night that I was working at the Laughing Devil Comedy Club, where one of Rich Voss's hecklers threatened to punch me in the face. He grabbed my shirt as I was kicking him out because he had been disruptive the entire show, and not in a fun way, just he was blind drunk, very toxic, ruining the whole vibe basically. And Steve got in between me and this guy and kept me from getting punched in the face. So we talk about that incident, and as well as, because the thing I wanted to do when I was approaching this interview is people who know Steve Hofstetter know him for his business savvy when it comes to comedy and heckler videos, but I don't think a lot of people talk about his stand-up and his stand-up influences. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit with him. And he told me this really great story about his late father, who I met briefly when I was helping build the stage. Feel like a real man's man for a second, couldn't build in stuff with my hands. But it was an interesting and kind of cathartic chat, because my life has come a long way since I was working the door at that club, and it's gotten a lot better. And I touch on some of the things that I was going through at the time that Steve didn't know about when I was working for him. And I thought it was a really great conversation. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you guys. And if you enjoyed this, please feel free to tell a friend. I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can follow me there. You can follow the podcast at AwesomeDPod. That would be a great way to help support. And if you enjoy the show and you want me to come and do stand-up in your city, I want to come do stand-up in your city. So get at me. Let me know where you are. Let's set up a gig. If you need me to open for somebody. I like to travel and I like to do comedy. So thank you guys again for the support and for telling people about the show. And let's go to my chat with comedian Steve Hofstetter. breaks that you get that leads to a sustained period of being successful, I think.
Oh, absolutely. There's the big break thing. I think the myth of discovery is one that I like tackling.
Right.
The industry of like, oh, we discovered this person. It'd be like, really? 9 years after they started doing stand-up, you discovered them? Uh-huh. You discovered them when they were already headlining?
Yeah, exactly. I think Bert Kreischer was talking about that. He was talking to Gary Owen about, newcomer Bernie Mac, but Bernie Mac had been like a really successful stand-up for a long time.
Yeah, the only person who discovered me was whoever created the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah.
Like that's I was when things hit for me, I was 14 years in.
Right, yeah.
So I think it's an industry perpetuated myth because they want credit for discovering someone.
Yeah, you want that sort of like Columbus moment.
Yeah, but because of that, you've got, these new kids who think they're going to be discovered. Mm-hmm. It's like, no one discovers you but yourself. That's how it works. You get a ton of small breaks here and there, and people will reach down and help you, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there will be some breaks that are way bigger than others. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, so much of this career is a sine curve. You have to accept the fact that every time you go up, you're going to go down again. You just hope it's an upward trajectory, a diagonal sine curve.
Exactly. Yeah, or if it's like an ocean, you're not just riding that one big wave and it's really awesome while it's happening, and then you just face plant and hit the coral.
Oh, there have been, I don't want to name them because I think it's mean, but there have definitely been some comics who have gotten like a TV show, a part on a big TV show, but they're just a part of it. And then suddenly they think that they're the big cheese and they don't do anything else. And that's the only type of person who has one big break, and that's because they're broken.
Right. The wave is done. I think about that like when you go and see like a Broadway show and all of the actors, like it's a big show and that's a huge deal to be in it. But then if you go, there are Twitters in a lot of the playbills now, and it's like 1,000, 2,000 something. My whole goal is I've really kind of over the past few years, my whole goal lately has been, and you kind of play into this, my goal is to do something that gets more views or eyes on it than the video of me almost getting punched in the face by a heckler at the Laughing Devil.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that was a good video though. It was a really good video. I was like shell shocked for a couple weeks after that, but thanks for getting in between me and that guy. Yeah, no problem. That was one where like you never, everybody talks big about, oh, here's what I would do in that situation, etc. Yeah. I was pretty happy with how I handled it. I was very happy with that. I didn't think about it. I just acted, and looking back at the video afterward, I was happy with how it went.
I think so too, and I feel pretty good about the way I handled it also, because for anyone who's listening to this who might not know exactly what you're talking about, I used to be the door guy at the club you used to own, the Laughing Devil in Long Island City. That's how we met. And Rich Voss was headlining, and there was this guy, not even a fun heckler. He was just like toxic for like
he was so drunk,
and I'm kicking him out, and he tries to instigate something with these like Jersey bro types, and then I just gently put my hand on his shoulder, and then he turns around, pushes me, and grabs my shirt, and then I'm thinking, I can't hit him first. That's right. That's my entire thought process. Is I can't hit him first, but I hope somebody comes so he doesn't hit me. Have to.
Well, yeah, and so I stepped between you guys.
Yeah,
and he shoved me, and there's a part in the video where like he shoved me, and I went back a step, and I just stepped back toward him again. Because I mean, I was much bigger than him.
Yeah, as was I. Yeah, like we could have taken him if we had to.
Absolutely. Although I don't think he had much to lose, but it was just a situation where I was just happy that I did what I could to make sure no one else got hurt, but also I didn't get hurt.
Yeah.
So it was it worked out as well as possible. And then my favorite part was at the end, as he's getting kicked out, I was like, you need to pay your bill, and tip the servers. Like, this isn't the server's fault.
Yeah.
And so he takes, I think it's almost like $100, and he throws it on the ground as if to be like, there's my tip. And I'm like, all right. And I just bent down and picked up the money.
Yeah.
Like, and gave it to the servers. I was like, I don't I don't mind bending over. That's your big get for me. You're going to make me actually reach down. Ooh.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're going to tip extra, but make me reach down. I'm totally cool with everybody. If everybody did that, if everybody at the end of their bill threw $60 on the ground, I'd be totally okay with having to pick it up.
Same. I feel like that's the most baller way to tip ever. Just leave the ground littered with money, and then I'll just come through with a broom and just get everything.
Absolutely. It was disrespectful for sure, but at the same time, like, we were just happy to get him out of there.
Yeah, and then the thing I said because I think Rich Voss did like another half hour after that, and the first thing I said to him was, "I'm sorry your set got interrupted." Not even thinking that I almost got in a physical confrontation. And he was
Absolutely.
just like, that was. I mean, I feel like that's because you're kind of known as like for heckler videos, but I feel like that's an underrated Steve Hofstetter heckler story.
Well, I appreciate that because it wasn't my heckler.
It wasn't my heckler either.
Yeah, it was Rich's heckler that I had to physically handle, which was a weird. And that's also, I think, part of why the video does well because, Voss has a big online presence and I have a big online presence, and between the two of us, it's kind of a weird cameo. It's almost like, like when the Empty Nest cast was on the Golden Girls, like that type of thing.
Right.
Where it's just like, wait, this is a crossover episode?
Yeah.
Why is Steve Hofstetter on a Rich Voss video? This makes no sense.
Yeah, the comedy universes are crossing.
Exactly.
That was like one of those weekends where I was like, I didn't expect this was going to happen when I got this job.
Welcome to working the door at a comedy club.
Oh my god, yeah. That was like the first time I got mentioned on because he talked about it on his podcast where he's like, "Oh, some comic works store." I was like, "Yes."
Yeah, that's me.
Rich Voss called me a comic.
I'm some comic.
That was validating for sure, but that is just like one of the many like great stories that I remember from that place. That was sort of like
the Laughing Devil was such a moment in time.
It absolutely was, because I was in a very I think I had been in New York City maybe 2 or 3 years at this point, and was like struggling, like just really, really struggling. I don't think I never told you this, but my first shift at the Laughing Devil, I had to pawn one of my guitars to get money to get on the subway.
I did not know.
It was dire, but I was like not gonna like bring everybody down with my struggles.
I actually sold my guitar my first year on the road.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I do. I want to talk. Was that a financial decision? Like, all right,
yeah, 100% a financial decision. It was just like, this isn't. I don't have this luxury anymore. I sold everything that wasn't a necessity.
Yeah, just like you were Marie Kondoing it before you had to.
Yeah, it was. But it was less about space and more about being able to afford space.
Yes. Yeah, especially in New York, and I want to talk a bit about this because you're like one of in the universe of people I know. I feel a very like New York kind of guy, even though you don't live here anymore.
Well, I appreciate that. I was born and raised here, and I lived here for 30 years, so I think I have my New York cred, even though I live in Studio City, California now. But I definitely am a Queens boy. Born and raised.
100%. And what neighborhood in Queens did you grow up in?
Oh, the whole thing. I spent most of my childhood in Briarwood. First year of my life in Laurelton, next 15 in Briarwood, next 2 in Forest Hills, next 1 in Regal Park. And then a couple years later, I came back, lived in Belrose, and then lived in Long Island City. So when I tell people I'm from Queens, I mean the whole damn thing.
You're just from
I'm a Queens boy. Yeah, it is put a push pin in the map in Queens, and I was there at some point.
What's Ridgewood like? Because that whole center section, that whole like M train section of Queens is still kind of a mystery to me.
I mean, what was it like or what is it like? Because Queens, when I grew up in Queens now, are completely different.
I'm curious what your experience of Queens was when you were growing up, because I love New York City. That's why I still like am so stoked that I'm living here all the time. So I'm always curious like what it was like when early on, before like the New York as I know it, which is like I moved to Sunset Park right before it gentrified.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what Queens and Briarwood specifically was like.
My street cred has gentrified because Briarwood used to be tough. Briarwood was low-income housing. It was so Queens is the most diverse county in the country statistically. More languages are spoken in Queens than any other county in the country. I think it's something like 200. It's insane.
Yeah.
And Briarwood is the most diverse part of Queens because Briarwood was founded originally as United Nations housing.
Oh, wow.
And then it just became low-income housing. And so all my friends in school, I was one of the only white kids in my group, at least. My friends were Lee Koo, who was Korean, Lazan, who was Chinese, Amal, who was Indian, and Steve Gomez, who was Mexican. That was my group I ran with, and it was a rough neighborhood. And now it's just like people are like, oh, it's 20 minutes to the city. That's great. Let's just rebuild this place. And so which is nice. It's made nicer, but it's definitely, when I say I'm from Briarwood, people are like, oh, that must have been lovely growing up. I'm like, it was not. I was mugged when I was 11. It was not lovely.
Right.
But it definitely, it made me tough and it made me tolerant. And it certainly wasn't as bad as neighboring neighborhoods. Jamaica, our Little League was Briarwood Jamaica Little League, and the Jamaica kids were way tougher than we were.
Yeah.
And even now Jamaica's not as bad as it was. The air train, I think, has made it a little friendlier.
Sure.
But yeah, it was rough. It was very blue collar, very working class. It was the people that kept Manhattan running.
Right.
The fancy. Anytime there's somewhere where there's a bunch of fancy restaurants, the people who work there have to live somewhere.
Right.
And they would live in Queens.
In Queens.
Queens, Bronx. Now mainly they live in the Bronx, but at the time, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, Brooklyn. It used to be Manhattan was 212 and every other borough was 718, like area code.
Yeah.
Because every other borough was kind of the same.
Gotcha.
Except it just wasn't Manhattan.
Exactly.
And then Brooklyn became cooler than Manhattan. And now half of Queens is, you can't get an apartment in Long Island City or Astoria for under $3,000.
I know
which is nuts.
I know it's crazy. Even before Amazon almost came in, it was starting to get crazy.
My favorite Long Island City story was, so when I ran the Laughing Devil, I was on the Queens Tourism Council, and so I knew all the local business owners. And I was talking to the owner of this restaurant, Manducatus, which is this Italian restaurant in Long Island City that's been around since before the high-rises came.
Gotcha.
When Long Island City was just like, I used to know the neighborhood because my father had a storage unit in Long Island City, and that's what was there. It was
it used to be like industrial.
Huge warehouses, and it was really bad. And so she was talking about how, like, the neighborhood's not what it was anymore. It used to be so much friendlier. And I was like, I used to come here. There were hookers on every corner. And she goes, yeah, but you knew the hookers' names. I was like, that is delightfully Long Island City.
Oh, that's perfect. It's like, oh, hi, Jasmine. It's like,
exactly,
hey, honey, how's it going?
Yeah, that's what it was. And now it's where the Mets live.
Yeah,
it's a very expensive neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I am curious about, and this is something my fiance said, who's born and raised in Brooklyn in Prospect Heights, which again, similar thing is like, oh, that must have been so nice. But when we first started dating, she would take me down lines of like, oh yeah, we didn't go down this street after dark. Oh yeah, someone got stabbed there, someone got mugged there, raped there.
And you're just like, at that coffee shop? Like, no, it wasn't
like
a coffee
it was
shop.
Something. It was a different kind. It was a different kind of tar back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I'm curious about, so when she moved from Brooklyn to Queens, that was like a big deal because I think there was a sort of elitism that Brooklyn had over Queens. Did you ever experience that?
Oh, 100%. It was, Queens. The running joke, like, that I had with my friends was that, like, Queens was like farmland compared to the rest of the city. Like, it was, Queens was malls and airports. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the grit of Brooklyn, and it wasn't the shine of Manhattan. Which, by the way, Manhattan wasn't even always shiny in my life. Like, I was in high school when everything got cleaned up. Times Square used to be filthy, absolutely filthy. Like, you never went west of 8th Avenue. 11th didn't even exist. I mean, it technically existed, but as far as we were concerned, no way you go to 11th.
Right.
And now, now the subway goes to 11th, which is ridiculous. And not ridiculous. I mean, I get it. It's made much nicer. But the thing is that artists have been priced out of New York.
Yeah,
like the LA art scene has gotten really good because they can't live in New York anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people grow up wanting to be an artist. It used to be you want to be an artist and you struggle and you move to Brooklyn and
and you and 3 friends split a $600 apartment, you can't get a parking space in Brooklyn for $600 now.
No, hell no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably even like Sunset Park. I think it's just called Souther Slope. Or are you familiar with they're trying to call I don't know if you know this, they're trying to split Harlem and North Harlem now.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and
do they call it Noha? Please tell me they call it Noha.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and the residents of Harlem are like, you can politely go fuck yourself with that shit.
Absolutely.
I have this joke where I talk about like when the first cupcake shop in Canarsie opens, I'm just gonna move into the ocean.
Yeah, that's basically. I mean, it's basically what's happening. I make fun of. It's been a bit now, but when I would perform in Alphabet City, because there were all these, like shishi new bars and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And I would tell people, I was like, you realize how this happened? Like, you guys all saw Rent.
Yeah.
And thought it was so romantic, and you're like, I want to move to Alphabet City and die of AIDS. And then like it just became this, hipster bohemian thing.
Yeah.
And look, I'm very torn on the concept of gentrification. Mm-hmm. I think forcing people to move out is terrible. I think there should be rent stabilization at the very least, if not rent control. Rent stabilization, I think, is important. I don't think you should price out residents necessarily, but the idea of not wanting neighborhoods to get safe, like we should want that. We all always want ourselves to improve, right? And so why wouldn't we want the same for our neighborhoods? And so the problem is that gentrification, it tends to run away from itself. It's like one coffee shop opens. And when I say coffee shop, I'm not talking about like a Starbucks. I'm talking about the kind of coffee shop where if you order a latte, they give you a dirty look because how dare you not want their fine blend?
Yeah.
That kind of coffee shop.
Right.
The kind of coffee shop that has unicycle parking. Like that opens, and then suddenly every 3 feet there's a Whole Foods and a yoga studio and it's exploded.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be some sort of middle ground where there is a government controlled, rent control type of I don't know. Look, I'm not a city planner. I don't know exactly.
Neither am I, but I'm hip to what you're putting out. Like a nice middle ground where residents' quality of life improves and the residents can stay there to enjoy it.
Right.
Like,
if you're putting the work in.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you that. Okay, so you kind of have so you're growing up in like a kind of like blue collar working class kind of existence, and I know your dad a little bit, but I don't know anything about, and I know about your bit about your sister. But what was like your home life like growing up?
So my dad worked all the time. He worked an hour north of the city, and in order to get, we didn't have money, and so in order to get use of, they did like a van pool. And so there were a bunch of people who worked up there that he would go around and pick up in this van, and they would all drive up to work. And he drove in order to have use of the van after work and on weekends because he had 4 kids.
Yeah.
And so this way they wouldn't need a giant car. They could just have this stupid van. And so that's what we drove around in as a kid. We drove around in this rented van that they used for a van pool for work. But because he drove it in order to get that for us, he left at 5:30 in the morning, came back at 6:30 at night. And, at the time when you're a kid, you're like, why doesn't Dad want to play with us? And it's like, he's tired, man.
Yeah.
He's tired. All he wants to do is just sit down, have a meal, watch some TV, and just be left alone for a second. And I completely understand that.
Yeah, my dad was a shift operator at a nuclear power plant. So like 12-hour days starting at like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., like 2 weeks on, or 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., just making sure that like, and it was 20 minutes from our house. So just, making sure that, we didn't get blown up.
Yeah. And it wasn't like my dad wasn't a nuclear power plant, but he was at a chemical plant.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a chemist. And so,
wow.
Yeah. And one of the things with my dad is, he taught us integrity. And the way he taught us integrity, the reason we were poor was because he had integrity. Because he worked at a company that their job was basically like, Reebok would come to them and be like, make my shoes jump higher. Nike would come to them and be like, make my shoes jump higher. They had contracts with both Nike and Reebok. They had contracts with both Goodyear and Michelin. And he never sold the recipes to the other one. He could have for millions of dollars, easily.
Yeah.
And he never did it because that wasn't the right thing to do. And I mean, I would joke with him about like, you couldn't teach us that lesson another way. You couldn't another way. But I'm really glad he did. You know, I'm really glad he was the person he was. My parents worked in a foster home when they were in their 20s. They ran a group home, and so one of the kids kind of kept in touch as if he was a brother. It's funny. At first, 3 did, and then 2 kind of, you know, went off their own ways. One of them kept asking for money, and it reminds me of that scene from History of the World: beggars begging from beggars. I found a letter he wrote to them when I was a baby. I mean, I didn't find it when I was a baby. He wrote it when I was a baby. I found it when I was like 12. And I guess I had just recently been born, and he didn't remember my name, which is fine. But like when he was trying to butter them up to give him money, he was like, oh, and you know, please send my love to Miriam, Adam, Sharon, and instead of saying "and the baby," which would have been the smart way of doing it, he wrote a blank. He just wrote like an underlined blank. Say hello to blank. I was like, what the hell is that, man?
You were blank.
I was blank. So I was the blank baby. But one of them kept in touch as if he was a brother. So but he's much older than us. So he's kind of an uncle.
Yeah.
And then I have 2 older sisters, an older brother. And you know, and my mother was a nursery school director. So, you know, she always very much valued education.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I remember being 3-4 years old doing like multiplication tables with my brother, just sitting at the table as, you know, as a game. And like that's what we would do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a very solid foundation to get early on.
It was, and I think that it enhanced it. That my dad wasn't a funny person, but he had a great sense of humor.
That makes
he knew what funny was. You know, my mother doesn't know funny. My mother will. Thankfully, she stopped now. She got the hint when I was like, you can't keep doing this. But she would like send me internet forwards, and I was like, these are the most trite pieces of garbage. Okay, ASCII text Tweety Bird, really? This is what you're sending me? But my dad, you know, it was rare that he made me laugh, but it was common that he sent me something that made me laugh.
Right. Well, he was also a big Dick Gregory fan.
Yeah. He was. Like I have the crazy Dick Gregory story. I don't know if should I go into the whole thing?
Yeah, you tell me a little bit about that.
So, my dad saw Dick Gregory live when my dad was 19 years old, and Dick Gregory performed at Queens College. And he used to play his albums for me when I was a kid. And when I say albums, I mean records, like straight up records.
Yeah, vinyl.
And look, there was audio tape then. You know, CDs weren't until I was like 11, but like there was audio tape. But no, my dad was a record player guy, so he would have fit in fine in Brooklyn. So so I was raised on Dick Gregory. I always had an appreciation for him. I always loved the story. We had a diverse family. My sister's adopted. She's black. And so Dick Gregory being the first ever black comic being invited to sit down on the couch with Johnny Carson was a big deal.
Yeah.
He ran for president in 1966. Like he was and he was a civil rights leader. He was a really big deal. So my dad was always a huge fan, and I got the opportunity to open for Dick Gregory.
Oh, cool.
And basically the plan was, it was like a Tuesday in Louisville, a Wednesday in Indianapolis, and then I would headline the weekend in Indy. And so I would drive from Louisville to Indianapolis with Dick Gregory. So I called up my dad. And my dad, who drove for a living, after he retired as a chemist, he was a cab driver for Boston Coach and a part-time FedEx driver. Like that's how we would make he was kind of forced into early retirement. And so that's how we would still have income.
Right.
So I called up my dad and I go, hey, I'm flying you to the Midwest and we're driving around the Midwest with Dick Gregory. And I was like, take off of work a couple of days. I got you. So he came out with me. It was the first time he saw me headline on the road also, which was a big deal.
Nice.
And it was a crazy week. It's something I want to write a movie about at some point, because just the two of us driving around with like his comedy hero, but also Dick Gregory was like benevolent and brilliant and also insane. It was such a, like, the way my dad put it was, everything he says is one of 3 things. It's either the most insightful thing you've ever heard, the funniest thing you've ever heard, or the most batshit crazy thing you've ever heard. and you never knew which of the three it was going to be. And it was on the drive, dropping Dick Gregory off at the airport that Thursday morning, like in the same drive, in like a 20-minute drive. He told me that I was the dumbest person he ever met, and how dare I have opinions like I had. And then he also said if I do another HBO special, he wants me to open for him. I was like, what is this? I don't understand what this is. The reason he said I was so dumb was because I asked him, I thought it was a valid question.
Yeah.
I was like, you were on the front line of the civil rights movement. And I said, right now, you know, the biggest civil rights issue of the day is homosexuality.
Right.
And which at the time, it was before gay marriage was legalized, or maybe it was right around when it was. But I said, I was like, what do you think is next? And he was so incensed at me even comparing the two. Comparing black civil rights to gay civil rights, that's why he got so mad at me.
Gotcha.
Because he was like, how dare you compare and blah, 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 you know, and I understand that he went through one and he's not going through the other, but, you know, civil rights are civil rights. But yeah, it was absolutely crazy. And that was, and so then at the end of the week, I dropped my dad off at the airport, and I was like, how crazy was this week? How great was this? And he just goes, yeah, I got to spend time with my son. And that's what he took from it. Yeah. And that was the last time I ever saw my dad.
Wow.
Yeah, he passed away a few months later.
Oh,
and yeah, but we had that week, and it's an amazing week.
Yeah, and well, I'm so glad that you got to have that. And based on my limited experience with him building the stage at the Laughing Devil, I don't know if you remember that, but he seemed like
of course I remember that.
Yeah, he seemed like he was a really great guy. So I'm glad you got to have that week with him.
Yeah, my dad helped us build that comedy club, the stage and the tables, and installed the flag, and helped with the bar, and you know all that stuff. My dad was a big like fixer guy, and the way I've been carrying it on is I like learned how to build stuff since then, and so like now it's become a hobby.
Oh, cool.
And so now, yeah, like I've built most of the furniture in my house, and I built my recording studio, and yeah, and it's something that I picked up after he passed.
Oh, that's one.
Yeah, not in time to help build the comedy club. I was very bad at that. But, you know, but I think going through that process is what helped me kind of learn.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very bad at a lot of that stuff too, but I feel like, you know, I became more of like a typical man's man when Marty would show me, your dad would show me something.
Absolutely. Here's how to hang something properly with anchors and not just a screw in a wall, you know?
Yeah. So, this is very interesting because I didn't know that you had this foundation in Dick Gregory. I'd always, when I look at your comedy, because I feel like not enough people talk about your actual stand-up. People tend to, it seems like most people focus on like the heckler takedowns, which
the business stuff,
or the business or the business stuff. Yeah, because you're a great example of someone who has this very successful career in comedy and isn't like Jerry Seinfeld level. And so, but what I'm curious is, I always thought I always thought you were like Bill Hicks was like your favorite comic, but it's good.
Yes.
Yeah. So this like the kind of like social commentary, truth to power, is kind of like feels like it's kind of running through you early on, based
100%.
And thanks to your dad.
It was Dick Gregory and George Carlin that he played for me early. That really helped. I discovered Hicks on my own, actually inadvertently due to my dad. I used to go to this barber shop with him, and they had a copy of Rolling Stone that I picked up and read once, and it was the issue of Rolling Stone where they did the Bill Hicks profile. And, you know, I always kind of gravitated toward comedy, and so I read that article. I still remember 2 of the jokes they quoted from it. And, like, that really, discovering Bill Hicks early, I think I was 12. It was right before he died. He died when I was 14. And so discovering him early, I think, definitely helped. But the reason I gravitated toward that stuff was because I already had the foundation of Dick Gregory and Carlin. The weird thing is the other 2 that my dad played for me were Cosby, who I never liked. Even before all this, I just found his stuff to be so easy and trite. It was, I liked the Cosby Show. I enjoyed the Cosby Show, but the albums themselves, I found his stand-up to just be so generic and so like, this is what it's like to have a family. And it's like, yeah, I've heard 1,000 comics do this joke. And then the other one was Bill Dana, who had this character, Jose Jimenez, who in today's, looking through today's glasses, super racist.
Right.
Yeah, it was this Speedy Gonzalez-esque, my name is Jose Jimenez. Like, it was a very, racist character.
Almost like a proto Jose Jalapeno.
Kind of, yeah. And it was, which is funny because like my dad wasn't that at all, and I don't know why he found that funny, but like I was always like, it seems kind of goofy, like I didn't understand the racist undertones of it quite yet because I was a child, but those two I never really liked, but I always wanted him to play the Dick Gregory and Carlin for me.
Yeah. And when you heard Bill Hicks, did you go, I'm going to be a stand-up comic, or did that come later?
That came later. The thing that started making me really interested in becoming one was the show Comic Strip Live that was shot at Laugh Factory. Wayne Cotter was the host the seasons I really liked watching, and I think it came on like Friday nights, and I loved it. And my sister and brother and I would just quote stand up to each other. I still remember some of the jokes. I don't know who the comics were. Some of the comics, I remember discovering, and like at that time, the Comedy Awards were a big deal. And I remember when Ellen DeGeneres won. I remember when Wendy Liebman won.
Wendy Liebman.
Yeah, it's actually so fun now because like Wendy has become like such like almost like a family figure to me. Like she has been such a sweetheart to me, just one of the most wonderful people in this business. And it's crazy that I grew up watching her. Like Elaine Boozler is the same way. Elaine's like a mother to me. And
that's so cool. I want to interview her because when I was first getting into stand up, I would see all of her, watch her stuff from Comic Relief, and then when I saw that she was on Facebook, I was like, Elaine Boozler's on Facebook.
She's wonderful, and this is what I love about the comedy world. So I had never met her. She was performing at the Laugh Factory on the 10 o'clock show. I was on the 8, and I was like, I'm going to stick around and watch her set and maybe say hello to her. I have no idea what kind of person she is. I don't know anything about it. So, and this is while Laughs was on the air.
Yeah.
So I wait around, and she's running a Tonight Show set. It's the first time she's done the Tonight Show in a very long time. And so she's running the Tonight Show set. The crowd's a little weird, so she decides to abandon the material and just go into whatever she wants to talk about. And she references Curtis Granderson, at the time an outfielder for the Mets.
Okay.
And I'm a huge Mets fan.
Yeah,
and I'm like, was she talking about Curtis Granderson? And so afterward, I go over to her and, I say, hey, I've always really enjoyed your work. I admire what you do. I didn't know you were a baseball fan. And she's like, yeah, I'm a huge Mets fan. I'm like, me too. And we start talking about it. And then we get into the subject of like dog rescue, because she runs a huge dog rescue, and like that's a thing I'm passionate about as well. And so now we're like just talking a mile a minute about the Mets and about dogs. And then she stops and she goes, you host Laughs, right? And I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, I DVR it every week. I was like, what? Why? And she's like, I love seeing new stand-ups. And she's like, it's the only show on TV that has people I've never seen before. And so she's like, I DVR it every week to see who I might not know yet. And it was just this amazing moment. And like from then on, we got lunch, and then she invited me over to her place. And she and also like, and all these other comics I never had a chance to meet, like these legends I grew up watching, because she's really close with Emo Phillips and Judy Tenuta.
Yeah.
Who are now divorced, but they're still friends. And so she's like, I'm going to invite them over too. And I was like, okay. And so then I just got to like eat dinner. I got to eat dinner with the 1980s.
That's amazing.
It was so cool. And yeah, and I've just been close with her ever since. And she is just a wonderful, wonderful person. And so like when I was a kid, I mean, these are all the people who I grew up just idolizing. But I still didn't want to be a stand-up. I wanted to try stand-up, but I didn't know I could be one. I never thought, hey, I'm funny enough for this. And
like as a career.
Yeah, I just wanted to try it. And then I ended up doing it because I couldn't find another job.
And what year did you start again?
I started, my first ever stand-up was January 7th, 2002. So I've been doing this 17 years.
17 years. And I always like asking this. Do you remember the first place you went up?
Oh, of course. I recently posted that set on my YouTube.
Oh, you did. I got to go and watch that now. Where was it?
So awful. The Underground Lounge. On
Upper West Side.
Upper West Side. It's now I think called the West Side or West End or something.
Yes, when they were. Yeah, that was one of the places when me and I don't know if you remember Kevin Frolix. He was another door guy. So when me and him were like running around trying to get stage time anywhere we could. That was
they started to do more like regular stuff, and we got past there, and then it closed a few weeks later.
So the Underground Lounge.
So yeah, I know there.
At the time, because there was this back room, and at the time we were running. So there was a guy there, Danny McDermott, who was like a staple in the New York producing scene, and he was running these 4 shows every weekend, 2 Friday, 2 Saturday, and they were basically Barker shows.
Yep.
So 3 ways for the listeners. 3 ways to start stand up in New York is barking, bringing, or open mic. Bringing is, you got to bring 10 friends to get, 5 minutes of stage time in front of a bunch of people that were tricked into coming to the show.
Yeah.
They're garbage shows and a predatory system.
Yeah. I would also co-sign with that. Bringers are not the way to become a comedian.
No. Open mics where you're buying your stage time, they usually cost, $3 to $7 to do it, and then you're performing in front of a non-audience. Or barking shows, which barking shows, in my time at least, you were out there for 2 hours passing out flyers, trying to get people in, and then you would get 5 minutes of stage time in front of a real crowd.
Yeah.
With real comics on the bill. And it taught me how to be a comic because, you have 2 seconds to get someone's attention when you're barking. The people in Times Square do it all wrong. They're just going, comedy, comedy, and then they lie to you. You want to see Chris Rock for $15 in a basement? Like, who really?
Yeah.
Who is gullible enough to think that that's actually true? Apparently, a lot of people. But for us, it was just, you would say just whatever you could say, like, you want to see stand-up comedy, no drink maximum, just like whatever you can get to be like, we got a petting zoo, we got a mini fridge, we got a, just say, being goofy and getting their attention. And, you get them inside, and those shows, Ed Helms was a regular, and Mark Maron was on all the time, Sarah Silverman and Ted Alexandro, and just really good comics that you get to learn from.
Yeah.
And you get to watch them and you get to develop because of it.
So you knew Maron. Like,
oh yeah, I've known Maron for 16 years, I think, maybe more.
Yeah. I met I've met him a couple times, like at book signings and stuff. What was your impression of him in the early 2000s? I'm trying to think when his first album came out. I can't remember if it was around that time or not. Do he still have the round glasses and the short haircut?
Yeah, so I think he had the long hair already, but I loved Maron before I met him. I thought his stand-up was brilliant. And, and working with him on the show, we were just on the same show together. I never knew if he knew who I was or anything. And then when I moved out to L.A., I was producing these shows called the King Davids of Comedy, where it was basically all Jewish comics.
Yep.
And Maron was a regular on them. We'd have him all the time. And so he knew me at that point pretty well. I was on when he was on Air America. I was on his radio show. And he did my Sirius show 2 or 3 times, I think. So by then, we actually know each other.
Yeah.
So it's right around when his podcast starts, when he's still in New York, I think. And I'm on my way to the airport, and I see him on an M train.
Yeah.
And it's it's not a very crowded train. I've got my suitcase with me. I'm clearly going to the airport. And I walk over, and I'm just like, hey, Mark. And he just has no idea who I am. Just completely blank, big times me. I'm just kind of like, all right, this was weird. Like, I thought we knew each other. But then, 2 weeks later, I'm at the Gotham Christmas party, and my back is to him. Like, it's not like he can even see my face. He walks over, taps me on the shoulder. Steve, how you been, man? Good to see you. And I'm just like, this is, what? What just happened? But that was always Mark to me. Mark was, you never knew which Mark you were going to get. Because he was so frantic and interesting, and but you always knew his stand-up was going to be great. And I still, one of the jokes I laugh at the most, I still remember it. First time I saw it was in this crappy restaurant we were running. It was called RB's, but not Arby's. It was R.B. But I'm like, how do you name your place that without thinking people are going to think it's Arby's?
Right.
But it was like a nice restaurant. But anyway, they had like a showroom, and so we were doing stand-up there. And one of the jokes I saw is I was dying. I think it's on one of his albums, but he talks about how his dad would call him frantic in the middle of the night, about like, and he was, we're going to open an amusement park. And he goes, yeah, you can run the bipolar coaster.
Yes.
And I was just, I
know that joke.
I like fell over. It was that was great. And that was also one of the great things about the Underground and just that scene in general, to see those guys developing what eventually would be on their specials was a ton of fun.
Yeah. I love stuff like that. Just like when I first moved here and I
I saw Mike Lawrence for the first time just at like an open mic, and he just really made me laugh. And then I would go to this. There was this open mic in Williamsburg called the Woodshed that was like notoriously brutal.
Yeah.
And he said, like, it was like my first like month or two in the city, and he said something nice about me when he brought me up, and I was like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I don't know if he likes me now, because I always feel like he doesn't like me for some reason. But
well, Mike's a hard guy to read, but I mean, I think I saw him at like, it was either an open mic or like one of these bar shows or something, do his Batman is a Republican joke.
I love that joke.
And I was
that
like,
joke is so
I was
good.
like, who the hell is this guy? And so he was one of the early people we brought over to the Devil. I think he won the first or second Laughing Devil Festival.
Second year, yes.
Second, yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember being excited when he started coming in, because he just made me laugh so much. And
yeah, he's great.
And it was so exciting. Like, again, like it was when the John Oliver New York stand-up show was on Comedy Central, and it was like, ooh, I'm going to go see a Comedy Central taping, and he was on it. I was like, that was like a moment where I was like, oh, it's possible.
Yeah.
It was so wonderful. So did you so you started barking shows? Did you go immediately? Did you at that time realize that also, like, did you start producing around that time as well?
Yeah. So I was barking for probably 3 months, and it was right outside of Columbia, and that's why I started. That's where I went.
Yeah.
And so, which was also, that was demeaning. Having to bark in front. I had just graduated the year before, so I still knew a lot of people that were in that neighborhood. And there was a girl I had a crush on, and she like walked by, and I'm handing out flyers. And so, she's like, I heard you were doing comedy? And I was like, oh, yeah. We all pitch in, we help out. It's like a communal show. And, really, it's like, no, me and 2 other people do this while the big guys are inside. It was so embarrassing. But at the same time, how badly do you want it? I remember that summer, and I did it in the winter. I was barking in December when it was a brutal winter. I had to learn the lesson to put newspaper under your shirt. It's like a bike messenger trick.
Oh, I hadn't heard about this.
You put newspaper under your shirt because it cuts the wind.
That's smart.
It's like, yeah, but also like you're wearing newspaper. Like that's how bad it was, because I'm out there for 2 hours, and you can't really, you can't completely bundle up because you got to be able to talk to people.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got to hand them a flyer. You can't wear like gloves and hand the flyer. So I would switch off which hand my glove was on. And so I was doing that for about 3 months, and I went to Danny, who was producing, and I said, hey, you got a room at Columbia. Why not try to start one at NYU? And so, like, he and I went down there together and found the basement of this bar called Nevada Smith's.
I remember Nevada Smith's.
Nevada's, I think it's still around.
I think so.
But they don't have the basement room anymore. They turned it into, like, keg storage, which sucked because it was a good basement room.
Yeah.
And we started an open mic there, and it became, like, the best open mic in the city. We would have NYU students actually there as crowd. And so what we would do is it was $5 to go up, and we would also book 3 to 4 actual comics on it.
Yeah.
Neil Brennan was a regular, because he knew he could stop by whenever he wanted and just go up, and it would be a good crowd, and we would often get overflow from Webster Hall. Like, nice. Whenever that show let out, and so sometimes people would go up twice in one show because the audience would completely turn over. It was a wonderful. It was so, and we did like I think we did a regular Thursday night show there too, but the open mic, we ended up doing 3 a week there because there was so much demand for comics to go up, and it was, and so that's how I kind of started. That's how I elevated from barker to producer, because I was like, hey, we can do more. And because I helped found the room, suddenly now I'm producing. And eventually I was running the team of barkers. And the basic thing I was told pretty early was, the second you can do more for this show with your stand-up than you can with your flyers, you don't have to flyer anymore. But you have to meet that.
Right. Yeah. And that's the frustrating part, I think, for so many comedians, because I imagine so many comedians are like, I'm good. There's got to be a certain point that I'm close to. But
there was a comic at the Laughing Devil who was a regular. I don't want to say who it is, but he was like, regular at open mics and stuff, and he auditioned for us, and I didn't pass him. And he was like, why not? I have really good jokes. I was like, you do. You have great jokes. You have no act. Anyone can tell your jokes. And in order for us to pass you, you have to be better than what we have. And you have to be memorable. You can't just write individual good jokes. You have to have a persona. You have to have, there's an art to this.
Yeah, and that's something I've thought about more and more as the years have gone on, in that joke formula is pretty easy to learn and teach, or at least pick up if you watch like a late night TV, like setup, punchline, and that's very easy to do. Topical jokes on Twitter. It's why I try not to do them so much. I try to do like stuff that's only I could think of, or like, and that's what being and that's what maybe having an act is like a collection of material that not only gets laughs but is also very unique to you.
Yeah, can you write a joke from that comic's perspective?
Yeah.
Like, if you had a writing assignment, because when you think about a sitcom, like when you think about Seinfeld, all right, you could write something for George to say, you could write something for Elaine to say, because you know the characters.
Yeah.
So, do you know someone's character on stage well enough to write a joke in their voice? If so, then they have a character. Then they have a strong voice.
Yeah. And there are comics that have that very specific thing of like, oh yeah, that guy or girl, they do this. Like,
Yeah.
you know, if you somebody like Mitch Hedberg, like, is very specific kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the jokes are great, but it's not just one-liners, because like Rodney Dangerfield did one-liners.
Yeah.
It's one-liners that are like only that mind could have thought of.
Yeah, there's a Mitch Hedberg Twitter, and it said, I think the bio of it says, I died, but now I tweet, I've improved my predicament greatly. Like, that is Mitch Hedberg. That's the voice of Mitch Hedberg.
Yeah, absolutely. This is and something I'm also curious about. So you're producing you're producing the show at NYU. You got this hot open mic. I imagine that's how you are interacting with a lot of the comedians.
Yes.
in New York. Does the transition to like, how did your transition to road work and this sort of like mini empire that you now have?
Well, I mean, the empire has been built and crumbled and rebuilt over the years, but the roadwork stuff
Did you start doing colleges first, or?
Yes, because I was the original writer for collegehumor.com.
Right.
And so I was getting college work before I was a stand-up. I actually got asked to do stand-up at colleges when I had my second ever show was stand-up at a college. A half hour.
Wow.
Yeah, that's insane.
I'm guessing you don't have a half hour.
No, I did not. I wrote it for that. And
wow.
I remember being in the hotel room going over the jokes to like remember what they were. Like I was doing like a half hour monologue. It went kind of well. I really wish I had the tape of it so I could see like, did it actually go well? You know what I mean? Like, or do I just remember it going well?
Yeah, that might be one of those, I survived and nobody threw anything at me, so
Right.
it worked.
But, people seem to want to talk to me afterward, and the reason I did it was I had written a book for College Humor, and I just wanted to promote the book. And so I remember, like, selling a bunch of books after the show, so it went well enough for that.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. But, I mean, it was probably hacky garbage. Like, looking back at it, I'm sure I'd be ashamed of it all. That's part of why I released the first set, because I was just kind of being like, you can see kernels of me, but there's so many act outs, and there's so many, because the comic I kind of learned from was a very physical comic. And so because of that, I was very physical in my first set. And then like when you look back at it, you're just like, who is that on stage?
Right. And then you also had like the Bill Hicks leather jacket, like
Definitely wore the leather jacket.
like the 90s leather jacket, like I got some shit to say kind of.
Exactly. Listen to me. I've seen some things. I'm 23. I know what the world is. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I started doing colleges, and then I needed work, and I figured out really quickly that there are two ways to go forward in this business as a stand-up. I'm not talking about peripheral stuff. I'm not talking about TV writing or now social media or etc.
Right. Live stand-up.
Two basic ways. One is you stay in New York or LA, and I'm talking about in the States. So you stay in New York or LA, and you starve, but you get seen by more people. Or you make a living on the road. The road takes longer because fewer people see you.
Right.
But it's funny. It's more uncomfortable because you're all over the place, but it's also more comfortable because you can pay rent.
Right.
You pay rent at a place you never see. But
Right.
I decided I was like, I would develop much better from doing a half hour a night. And, so I started featuring on the road pretty early. I just sent my tape out everywhere. When I say sent my tape out, these were the days it was actual VHS.
Yeah.
And I remember early on being like, I need to stand out somehow. And for an extra 10 cents, when you bought VHS tapes, I could get them orange. And so I bought orange VHS tapes so that my tape would stand out. And like I would do little things like that. And that's the kind of thing I've always done.
Yeah. Nice. And how were those early gigs?
Oh my God. So bad. So bad. I remember being so excited when one finally came with a hotel room. I mean, some of them were horrible. And some of them were good. And you never knew which one you were going to get. But it made you a better comic because you had to learn to deal with it. There was a stretch. I recently put a video up. I told the story on my YouTube. There was a stretch of gigs I did for this company, Giggles. They don't exist anymore. It's different than whatever, than the Giggles Comedy Club.
Okay.
There were these series of one-nighters in southern Georgia. It was Valdosta, Jessup, and St. Mary's. And it burned into my memory. And I was excited because Bill Hicks is from Valdosta. And no one in Valdosta knows that because they don't know things about things.
Sure.
And the gigs were terrible. They were all like bars of hotels. And like there was one, and they told us there were a bunch of words we couldn't say. One of them was cock. And so as I'm going up on stage, it's not even stage, it's floor with a bunch of tangled microphone cords. And some guy goes, "Who's this cocksucker?" And I just go, "That guy just called me a cocksucker?" I got fined $25 for repeating the word back that the audience said, because the audience needs a clean show, even though they're yelling out that I'm a cocksucker.
Jesus.
And if there's any place I've ever played that the audience does not need a clean show, it is a hotel bar in St. Mary's, Georgia.
I imagine so. Their lives are probably hard enough.
Yeah. A booker once said to me, because I was doing, and this is after I did Laughs. This was in Temecula at Pachanga.
So this is relatively recently.
This was 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
And, I get the email after I take the booking and everything. And I filmed a TV show there for a year. I sell that place out. Like that is all the local media knows me, like I was going to come with a bunch of press. It was going to be a good weekend, and they were paying me hardly anything. And I was mainly doing it because my buddy's parents live there, and they've been wanting to see me for a long time. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go do a show there. And so I get an email from the bookers saying, like, all the house rules. And one of the rules is you have to be clean. And I email back, and I go, hey, I've done a lot of shows there, and I've never had to be clean. Is this a template, or is this real?
Right.
And she was like, no, you have to be clean. And I wrote back, and I go, well, I'm drawing people. They're my fans. Why? They don't want me to be clean. Why do I have to be clean? And she goes, no one ever walked out of a show complaining that it was too clean. And I wrote back, and I said, yeah, the word they use is boring. They don't say too clean. They do say too boring.
Yeah.
And if I was a clean comic, they wouldn't find me too boring if I was clean.
Yeah.
But I'm not. And so, like, let me do my thing. This is not a corporate event. This is not a church fundraiser. And also, tell me the rules of the gig before you give me the gig.
Yeah.
Like, and if I take it, that's my fault. If I take it, I can't complain if I knew what I was getting into.
Right.
But if I take the gig and then you go, and by the way, you have to be clean, I should be able to be like, no. No, actually, that's not what you negotiated with me. So,
Yeah. I it seems like, and if they're booking you, you think they maybe would have clicked, like, did a Google search.
I'm also not dirty. I'm just not clean.
Yeah, that's the other thing I always found weird is, like, I would never describe you as like a filthy X-rated
No,
type
but I
of
like saying the word fuck.
Yeah, but fuck in New York is just a comma at this point.
Yeah, I don't even use it as a comma. I use it as an exclamation point.
Yeah.
But it is punctuation. And not only that, like, there are certain words, like the word bullshit has a specific meaning.
Yeah.
There are words that, there was this joke I used to do. I used to do this joke about the FCC and about censorship. And in the joke, I talk about the word fuck. And you can't do that joke without the word.
Yeah.
Like, but it's about the word. It's not a dirty joke, and it's funny because I actually had a reputation for a long time as being a clean comic, and I always laughed at it because I was like, I'm not clean, but I'm not sexual at all in my stuff.
Exactly.
Like, I don't do any, and I don't talk about bodily fluids. I don't talk about any of that stuff. But I do curse, and I do get dark. And I talk about abortion, and I talk about Nazis, and I talk about like things like that. And so to some people, that's not corporate clean, and it's not even late night TV clean.
Yeah.
But it's not, so is railing this girl, right? Like, that's not my set.
Yeah. It's PG-13, or I would say or maybe like a
Light
soft R. Soft R.
It's a lowercase R.
Yeah, it's a PG-13 movie, but like I don't know if it's still the case or not. But in This Film Is Not Yet Rated, where they talk about the movie censorships, if you say fuck twice, that'll make your PG-13 movie R. You can only say fuck once in PG-13.
Oh yeah, it's definitely R.
Yeah,
yeah.
So, but it's like a technical R.
Yeah, exactly. The best kind of R.
Yeah. Well, there's something kind of endearing to me about you that at your core, even though you've been doing this for 17 years, that there's still very much a journeyman working comic in your DNA and in your operating system. Well, no problem, man. Because like before I even met you, you were like your albums would come up on iTunes when I was like really getting into stand up and and so you were like one of the first people I listened to early on, so it was cool to like get to meet you and work with you. Even if I was like and I'm in a much better place now, but even if I was in those like why can't I do Friday night shows, Steve?
Yeah. Well, now you know.
Yeah, well no, I get it absolutely, and now that I'm not relying on that good set for the sole source of my happiness, it's a much healthier way to live. So that when the good sets do come in, they're gravy. It's gravy.
Well, one thing I remember about your set is I remember you were doing material about, I think it was about a breakup.
Yes,
and it was about a bad breakup. And I remember saying to you, "This won't be funny until you're okay with it." Because we could tell that it still hurt you. And comedy is tragedy plus time.
Yeah.
And so it's the reason why, like, right now I've started writing material. I haven't even used it yet, but I've started writing a material about losing my dad. And it's because it's been 4 years, and I'm finally able to talk about it without crying. And, like, to be able to... And it was funny. You were the first person I said that to, but it's something I've said to a lot of people now. The idea of like stand up about something dark can be very, very funny as long as you have to be over it because the audience might not be.
Yeah.
And so if we feel your pain, we can't laugh.
Yeah, and I remember one time doing a set at like a late night spot at the comic strip and just bumming everybody out. When that crowd does that whole awe reaction. Yeah. It's like, that's not what I'm going for. But yeah, that makes, it makes perfect sense. Like, so you can talk about it from like an objective place. Like if Sam Kinison did that joke about how he cheated on his girlfriend and then she put the loaded gun in his luggage, right after it happened, probably would have played very differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that, you look back at where you were in your life. And I mean, I didn't know the detail about the guitar.
I got it back, by the way.
Excellent. Good to hear. I did not ever buy mine back, but the detail, like if you're in a place in your life because comedy can come from darkness. Absolutely. And some of the best comedy we have comes from darkness. But you have to be okay with the darkness. And that's something that is difficult to do as a human. And you're human first, comic second. And so I just remember that about your set. I remember that I was like, he's still going through it right now. And it's going to be funny once he gets through it, but he's got to get through it before. And it doesn't matter how good the joke is. If we can feel it, we can still feel it.
Yeah, that's something I definitely tried to remember, and just you telling it to me again, I'm definitely going to keep that going because
I hope so. It's been like 6 years.
Yeah, well, I'm in a much better place. I've got this, and I've got this like I wouldn't call it a one-man show in a theatrical sense, but it's closer to a storytelling show than is like set up punch kind of stand up.
Yeah,
and it's coming along pretty nicely. I just did
3 performances of it in February.
Yeah.
And it's slowly taking shape. I still need to work on it, but I just love the fact that I'm like, oh, I can do 40, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Feel like an artist.
Yeah. Lets you stretch.
Exactly. So that's something, and again, with some distance from it, like let it go. It's funny how some distance makes everything seem small. So thank you again for that advice and for
absolutely.
that and for that employment at a time when I really needed it. One more thing I want to ask you, just because I feel like if I'm talking to Steve Hofstetter, I got to ask a business question. Are there any kind of general bullet points you could give me as far as just setting up shows, places, and successfully promoting a show?
Don't compromise.
Okay.
There's so many times people go, this room would be almost perfect for a show. That's not enough. If you want a show to do well, the environment needs to be good. And that includes sound, stage, lighting. Like, you can't turn, there's that phrase, you can't carve rotten wood.
Yeah.
Like, you can't turn we got this great private back room and it's awesome. It's awesome except these 3 load-bearing pillars in the middle of the room that obstruct half the view. Well, then it ain't awesome. And so if you're going to set one up, first of all, the venue needs to be correct. And once that is the case, do not compromise on sound, stage, or lighting either. If you got to build a stage yourself, make it portable or whatever. If you got to bring 2 Home Depot clamp lights in every time, if you got to pull in the PA yourself, do it. But don't just go, the lighting will be okay. These 2 track lights are kind of pointed in the direction of the stage. Like, when you set it up, the environment needs to be right. Because a great lesson I learned, we had this little room we were doing at this bar in Chinatown. And it was a good bar. Like, it was a cool environment for a show. But all the seating they had was not designed for someone to sit there for an hour and a half. And so there was one, my mother came to one. And the lineup, it was Gaffigan, Ted Alexandro, and I forget who else, but it was just like 6 really heavy hitters. Just one of the better shows I'd ever put together. And afterward, I go, what'd you think? And she goes, oh, my back hurts. And I was like, that's what you thought, your back? But people are human beings. And like, no matter how good the show was, she was uncomfortable the entire time because she's sitting on a stool with no back.
Yeah.
And that really made me look at production differently. And it really made me think of like, okay, people have needs first. And no matter how good this show is, you've got to make the environment good too. So that's what I would say concentrate on.
Excellent. Thank you. And is there any sort of, as far as like, is there any sort of trick you found at like getting press or like getting someone to write about you that I should maybe incorporate into my knowledge?
Yeah, be a human.
Be a human.
Like, don't ever send a press release. Press releases are stupid.
I hate those, yeah.
You send a 2-sentence email saying like, hey, this is what it is. I'd love to talk to you more about it. And if they're interested, then you send them the details. But just sending a blast of like, here's a thing to ignore really quick. And never send a press release. I always send, the technical term for it is query email.
Okay.
But I send a query email instead, where it's just a quick little summary. Say, I'd love to talk to you more about this. I'd love to invite you out, et cetera. And you just be a human. Or have someone else send it on your behalf, because if you send it for yourself, then it doesn't look as good.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's going to be my next that's something I'm trying to learn more is the show is getting to the point I'm learning it a little bit as far as like trying, because I was getting this podcast known, but the show, I'm at a point where like the show is getting good. Now I got to get people that want to see it.
Well, yeah, but also the other thing is don't sell a product you don't have.
Right.
And, a lot of people, like, it's funny, I put up my first ever stand-up set 17 years after I did it.
Right.
There are all these people who, like, they do stand-up for the first time they put up. They're like, what'd you think? Be like, I think you suck. Everybody sucks when they start. I don't even have to watch this.
Yeah.
It could be your 10th show. You still suck. Maybe 100 in, you're probably decent.
Right.
And people are so concentrated. It's funny. I know it's funny for people to hear me, of all people, say this. but like you don't sell a product you don't have. And you could be fantastic at publicity, you be fantastic at getting attention, but you have one shot at each person. And you know, there's that you don't get a second chance to make a first impression cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, that's hype versus publicity, I think. Like, it's, you know, generating hype and then having nothing to back it up is exactly right. That's how you get those flash in the pan crashing of the waves.
But when you think about your one-man show, are you developing it or is it done?
It's still developing. It's not done.
Right. So this is, and it's a catch-22 because you need people to attend in order to develop it, but you also don't want to get it out there before it's ready.
Right.
So like,
yeah, it's workshopping.
I was happy with the first draft of my book. Thank God for editing. It is so much better than it was. And when I look back at what I would have put out into the world if I didn't have an editor, I'm so happy I didn't. Like, go back, force yourself to make it better, and force yourself to make it better from that, and then you reach out to press.
Good. That's good information to keep in mind. Well, I'm gonna keep doing that, and maybe when I feel like I've got a competent first draft, I'll email it to you and see what you think.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, it's been a pleasure to catch up.
This has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That was really cathartic in a lot of ways, because not only to think back on how different my life is now compared to the way it used to be, but also to that advice that Steve gave me back then and reminded me of. That's something I'm going to remember as far as like keeping distance from things that I'm going to do material about, as well as this one-man show that I've been workshopping. If you've been listening to the show regularly, that's something I'm going to keep in my mind as I continue to work on that. You know, I want to polish that so that when I show it to the world, it's something I'm really proud of. So thank you, Steve Hofstetter, for your time and for your candor. It was great to catch up with you too, Steve. So thank you guys again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please feel free to give us a rating or subscribe on iTunes, or add us to your favorites playlist on Stitcher. That helps other people discover the show. And if you enjoy this, tell a friend, because this is an independent kind of thing, and like the way the media landscape is, it's not a big break, it's a series of continuous breaks, and I thank you guys very much for helping be a part of my ever-growing momentum as I want to grow this show. So thank you guys again. You can follow me on Twitter at ComicWillCarey. You can follow the podcast at AwesomeDPod. And if you want me to come to do stand-up in your city, I don't care if it's not in America. I want to go everywhere. So if we can find a place where we can get a bunch of people together and make it work money-wise, I'm there. So feel free to get at me. And thank you guys again for tuning in. And I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.